Tonight on Need to Know, breaking the silence of sexual assault. We'll learn about one woman's journey as she works to ensure local survivors aren't shamed but empowered. Also on the show, how a historic spiritual practice intended to connect the mind, body, and spirit is being adapted to support everybody. Inclusivity in the Rochester yoga scene later on the show. And it's the question we all ask ourselves, who am I? Well, tonight, yours truly will find out in a genealogy reveal with co-host of Genealogy Roadshow, Kenyatta Berry. Don't go anywhere. Need to Know starts right now. Rochester's Nicole Levon is a filmmaker, an artist, and a survivor. A woman focused on giving a voice to the voiceless is now doing so with a deep personal connection. Levon went public not long ago to share the story of her own rape at the age of 15 and the child she bore and kept as a result. Levon is now on a mission to ensure survivors of sexual assault have safe spaces to share their stories, plus access to healing. Joining me now to share more about her work is filmmaker Nicole Levon, joined by Robin Brent, a minister of spiritual peacemaking who has been pivotal in assisting Levon with her mission. And I welcome you both. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Nicole, it wasn't long ago when you decided to go public and to share your story. And I want to know, what was it? What was that turning point when you said, I need to make sure people know what I've been through?
That's a very good question. I think over the years, it's kind of been a flame inside of me where I've always put other people first and the emotions of what other people would think instead of putting myself first. That's one of the hashtags of my movement is me first, because as a survivor, we tend to feel guilt about what happened to us and shame because society has already painted that picture and been very judgmental towards survivors of rape. Many of people don't believe people when they come forward. So for 35 years, I kept it to myself. Few friends and family knew. But I think the burning desire is when I was talking to another survivor and we both realized that, wow, I didn't know. And it just stirred a discussion and conversation that just sparked a light in my heart that I just knew I needed to be free.
In what ways do you both believe that silence around sexual assault serves as a disservice, not only for survivors, but also for our society as a whole?
Well, we really need to have a conversation. And without that, people just lack awareness, lack wisdom. So it's important for everyone so we can find a solution, is to share things.
I think the community, a lot of us don't realize that we do have mental health issues, and mental health is a very hard topic to talk about. A lot of people don't want to admit that they have PTSD. I think I was in denial for years. In fact, I know I was in denial for years that I had PTSD. But through therapy and through getting to know myself of who I am. And like Robin was saying, once you start cleaning yourself out spiritually inside, everything else from your mind and your body will flow as well. You know, a lot of survivors like myself got eating issues. I just eat it away, you know, ain't nobody gonna see this. I'm just gonna take this whole ice cream and just, you know, and you, sometimes some survivors find ways to cope. And I realized, you know, the pills and pills that they may give survivors may not be the best approach. And I realized living holistically, drinking good tea, you know, and meditating, doing yoga is something that I never did before, but just being healthy physically and clearing your mind first, getting that mind space together, because you can't do anything with a clogged mind. That's what I've learned in my journey.
Robin, you partner with Nicole on local survivor workshops for victims of sexual abuse, and we'll get into the details of those workshops in just a bit. But explain the importance of having a space and the ability to just heal, why that is so pivotal to the healing process.
Well, it's really crucial for people to feel loved and to feel safe. So the first thing we do is create that space. And people can share, people don't have to share. People can say they are coming to support others, even if it's themselves, and we won't know, but they can just come and learn how they can help themselves. Having the space, you get in touch with your soul. My spiritual teacher always says, heal the soul first, and the mind and body will follow. And in my years of experience, I find that to be true. And then the issues can come out, we can shed light on it, and they can heal.
Absolutely.
Well, Nicole, you launched a series of free workshops in partnership with Robin. This is for local survivors of sexual assault, women and men. Talk about what is pivotal, what's happening in these workshops that you would say it's pivotal, and maybe things taking place that you would say I didn't have access to and I needed support for myself for healing.
Well, let's first talk about the workshops, as you were saying, and then I'll go into that as quickly as I can. I'm long-winded. The workshops I felt were necessary because when you're a sexual assault survivor, you may go to therapy, and therapy is one thing where you have a counselor there that's listening to you and you're able to free yourself, you know, between that person confidentially. But I felt that there was no groups here in the Rochester area. I contacted an organization here, and they said they were going to have survivor groups, but it never came to fruition. So I decided to start this group. One thing that was wonderful is that I talked about the different types of rape that there are. There's military rape, there's child rape, there's friend rape where you know the person who assaulted you. I needed to break that down because some people don't understand the difference between sexual assault and rape and what that means. In corporate America, sexual assault might be sexual harassment, and they put that underneath that umbrella. And somebody from an urban area might say, oh, well, this is rape because they physically hurt me. So that's why I introduce what those topics mean, and I give a description. I also introduce self-defense, where I show a video of at least 3 to 5 minutes of showing 5 different movements so that people hopefully don't have to use this, but they're at least prepared. And that's what I do in the workshops. I give people time to express themselves on a platform, and she also has time as well to introduce holistic healing. And you were saying for the second part of...
Yes, just in terms of what's being offered that was not available for you.
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't offered in 1983 when I had my daughter 35 years ago. Those services weren't offered. Some of those services are offered, but they're in bigger communities such as New York City. So, and in this population, we have over 208 million. The reported total per year is 164. We need to have that down and reduced here in the Monroe County area.
And Robin, what techniques are you teaching to those who attend these workshops? What types of techniques?
Well, there's different kinds of meditation. And so the kind of meditation that I'm using initially to start out with is a tracing meditation. So I bring in what some might call ancient or sacred calligraphy that you can trace. And I put on some very, I'd call it healing music. And it brings in a lot of light. And that could be deceptive. When I say light, I don't mean like, oh, we just turned on the lights in the room, but that it brings in healing and blessings and things that you may not see with your physical eye, but people can see with their spiritual eye. And all of that assists people. They feel better. You can see it in the way they walk, in the way they talk, in the way they speak, from the before to the after. And it makes a huge difference. It just impacts their lives. When they think of the trauma or the situation that occurred, it no longer feels traumatic. And so while it's always going to be a part of you, it doesn't control your life.
We have to close, but just to point out, you are working on a documentary, Nicole, about your story. Is that correct?
Absolutely. It's entitled Tenacidad. I was creative enough to keep the title the same and keep it moving. The reason why I wanted to do this is not only am I healing my soul, but I'm inspiring others to come forward and talk and be aware of what's going on. I think once we have an awareness, we can start healing our community.
We have to close for now, but first, a very special thank you to my guests for your time today. For more information about Nicole and Robin's upcoming workshops for survivors of sexual assault, the next one being this Saturday, December 22nd at 12:30 p.m. at Phyllis Wheatley Library, go to NicoleLavan.com and click on workshops. The spiritual practice of yoga is said to have immense health benefits. A reduction in fatigue, anxiety, and inflammation, plus an improved mood are just a few of the many upsides. But when you see common yoga poses like downward facing dog, tree pose, and half moon, it would appear as though the healing benefits are only available for a certain percentage of our population, specifically those without mobility disabilities. But that is not the case in Rochester. An adaptive yoga class is now available every week for residents with partial or total paralysis, MS, muscular dystrophy, spina bifida, and more. Joining me to share more about mobility and inclusion and, of course, the power of yoga is Rob Tortorella, founder of Endless Highway, a foundation raising awareness for adaptive recreation, and Michael Amy, adaptive yoga teacher and physical therapist. And I welcome you both. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So there is, as we know, there's a lot of hype around the world of yoga, and after you hear about those health benefits, that is for good reason. But I'm curious, Michael, have you had an unbeliever join the class, someone who was like, I don't know about this yoga thing,
Yes.
and then all of a sudden they would now say to you, I am a believer?
I'd have to say at least half of the class was that way. So skeptical coming in, and I think after the first class in particular, the one student in particular, I couldn't have scripted it better. The sensations he was describing and the experience he had in that first class was more than I could have imagined. So he was starting to sense more of his body and come more into himself, and that was the greatest gift that he could share.
And the cause of the skepticism, any?
I think he had been to physical therapy. He had been to a number of rehab facilities and an ongoing struggle with mobility, and he just found his body in that first class and a way to access sensation, grounding, expansion, some of the inherent sensations that every yoga pose offers. So he was able to access that after the first class, and I think that in itself made him want to come back, and he's been back ever since. So.
Let's talk about access in general to a sport, activity, anything like this. And I want to ask you about this, Rob, because your nonprofit, Endless Highway, you are focused on making sure that people have access, whether it's to inclusive sports or activities, you name it. Talk to me a little bit about the challenges that exist in our community when it comes to access that you're working to address.
Sure. And I'll start with yoga. Michael and I had a friendship, and with Michael's experience, and he worked with Matthew Sanford, who's kind of the guru of adaptive yoga. So 2 years ago, we did an awareness seminar here in Rochester at the Strathallan to raise awareness about adaptive and inclusive yoga. And then this summer we did another one which had more impact. There was more community awareness, and that was really the base to start the inclusive classes that Michael's been running for the last 3 months. As far as the community, there is an awareness now about inclusivity, because it is important for children and young adults and adults with disabilities to be included in various activities. Everything from being able to go into an arcade to play games, or summer programs that the communities offer for children, making sure that those have accommodations for disabled children to participate. It helps them develop socially. It helps them feel good about themselves. It helps their family, their brothers, their sisters, their parents be part of what they're doing, whether it's wheelchair basketball, adaptive canoeing down the canal. So it's kind of gaining momentum, and that's what Endless Highway is kind of facilitating to really bring awareness and get kids that necessarily don't have the, that are disabled, that don't have the access to provide access for them in recreation, sports, and the arts.
Well, Endless Highway sponsors this adaptive yoga class, and I want to talk a little bit about it, because when I was there, one thing that I heard you say again and again: breathe, breathe,
right.
breathe. You had a student who was like, do I have to keep breathing?
Right.
And you said, yes, you do. So when it comes to adaptive yoga, is breath more important than a pose, for example?
Not necessarily. I stress the breath because I think a lot of people forget how to breathe. And when something is new, we tend to hold our breath to kind of figure out where we are in space. And the students that are in the class that have some mobility challenges, they've lost that sensation of really connecting with their whole body. So if I can get them grounded and I can facilitate them to breathe into a new space, then they're able to access, a bigger part of their body that maybe that they weren't able to access before. Because really yoga is about connection and union. And whatever I can do to help facilitate that with someone, whether it's through breath, whether it's through grounding, whether it's through movement, or just showing them a sense of direction in their body, then that's what yoga is about. There are some inherent sensations that are regardless of the pose. It doesn't matter what the pose looks like, but there's sensations of grounding and expansion, a sense of rhythm, and the sensation of balance that is inherent in every pose. And that's truly how the adaptive class is focused, is allowing people to access those sensations so they can access a greater part of themselves.
What's really, I've had the opportunity and the luxury to be able to have one-on-one sessions with Mike over the last couple of years, and it just has a huge impact on my body, physically as well as mentally. And what's great is, Michael's training as a physical therapist and that base, and then, being a yoga instructor, he's really able to understand the body and adapt accordingly to each individual with a disability. And I think when you, at the class, the other yoga instructors that volunteer their time to assist each person, they all have different abilities and different levels of physical mobility. And Michael's really able to kind of figure out what the best pose or how he can adapt to get the maximum impact out of the pose.
Unfortunately, we are out of time and we have to close, but before we do, a special thank you to my guests for joining me. I appreciate it. And to you, our viewers, you can learn more about the work of Endless Highway and get involved with adaptive yoga. Just go to endless-highway.org. And the story is part of WXXI's Move to Include initiative to create a more inclusive community. Head to our website to find more. Well, there is a common question many of us ask ourselves: who am I? It's a question that has launched thousands of genealogical quests around the country. And guess what? It launched a search into my own family story. With the help of genealogist Kenyatta Berry, author and co-host of Genealogy Roadshow on PBS, I was able to put an age-old family question to rest. Sort of. Here's a look at my genealogy reveal done this week with Kenyatta, who joined me from California. Kenyatta, it's been said that author Alex Haley's 1976 bestseller, Roots, really helped to launch this genealogy craze that we have now. So more than 4 decades later, genealogy is the second most popular hobby in America, next to gardening. So I want to ask you, what is the draw? Is it that these kits, these genealogy kits, are more available and people are buying them, they can get them off the counters, or is there something else that is connected to this?
Great question. And I do think it is, and it's so true, Alex Haley really, Roots really rejuvenated that interest in genealogy. And today it is having access to online records. It's really been big with Ancestry, MyHeritage, Family Search. But you are correct. DNA is where it's at. And all of the availability, I should say, of DNA tests, whether they're on sale for $49.99 now during Christmas or Mother's Day, but everyone wants a connection to the motherland or to the home country, and DNA can really solve that, or at least help them get started. So I think that's why we've seen this explosion in genealogy.
Well, you've been digging into my genealogical history for the Bianduti family, my father, the Brockle family, my mother. On my dad's side, I would guess that it was not easy. He was born in Kinshasa, Congo, and records are hard to find if they were even created to begin with. So talk to me a little bit about the process of tracking down my family story before we get into some of the findings that you discovered.
Sure. So tracking down your family story, I was, yes, you were correct. Your dad's side was challenging. I mean, and I really thought to myself, I said, oh man, if I have this on both sides of the family, I don't know what we're going to do, right? Because it is one of these things where when you have someone who is first generation, right? You have to think about all the different things that impact, and this is also on your mom's side as well, and we'll get into that, but all the things that impact access to records, wars, natural disasters, changing of territories, right? With your dad's side, it's the record keeping, how to find it. It's the oral history, right? As you tried to go back and talk to relatives and find that one branch, the tree is kind of lopsided, right? And that's where DNA helps on that side. With your mom's side of the family, it was a little bit different, but also with her side, there's also those changing boundaries. And that's the thing in European, when you think about looking in European genealogy, you have to understand the changing of the boundaries of the principalities in Germany versus just the moving kind of borders. And when someone may think they're Polish or they're Russian or they're German, right, that could change.
Right. So listen, I have to tell you, my family, especially my mom and my brother, they've been texting like crazy and wanting to know, what you found. So you can lay it on me and tell me about it. Okay.
So to let you know what I found, on your mom's side, you came back 43% European.
Got it.
Okay. So 43% European. And of that, you are 33% West and Central Europe.
Okay.
West and Central Europe, as defined by Family Tree DNA, is France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, Switzerland, Austria, Czech Republic, and Germany.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
So that's West and Central. You're 10% Scandinavian.
Okay.
Okay. And you came back 5% Asia Minor.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, which is present day Turkey and Armenia.
Okay. Very
And this is all on your mom's side.
Okay.
Now, how does this really fit? What does that really mean?
Right.
As it's interpreted, because I'm giving you this information. And you're like, okay, well, what's that? So what, basically, right? With the autosomal test, what is good about this test is there's something called a family finder. So when you think about doing DNA and doing an autosomal test, the family finder takes your DNA that Family Tree has in their database and compares it to other people that have tested, right? So you get these notifications, you have a new match, right?
Yeah.
That's because you have a new family finder match. That means your cousins have tested.
Got it.
In Family Tree DNA. So since your mom and your brother, they've been texting back and forth and they want to know what's going on, the family finder is the way to do that.
Okay.
Because the family finder, once you are able to find those cousins that you're connected to, then they'll be able to kind of set you up with your most recent common ancestor. And what does that mean? That means this is the person that ties you two together.
Interesting.
So the only way you can do that is by having the family tree. So we worked on your family tree, right? We've gone back a bit. And one of the things I found interesting in looking at your results is because we talked about, because your ancestors immigrated through Castle Garden.
Yes, that's right.
Yes. So through Castle Garden. And Castle Garden, for those that don't know, was the predecessor for Ellis Island. And they immigrated in around, I believe, 1888 is when they came through Castle Garden.
Okay.
Right?
Wow.
And coming through Castle Garden, they identified themselves as Russian. Right? And I know that they in your family.
Yeah, there was. People were German, Russian, they were going back and forth.
German, Russian, going back and forth.
Yes.
Well, the other thing that we did with your DNA is you did an MT DNA test, a full sequence.
Okay.
So we've done the autosomal, that's just to repeat, that's 50% of your mom, 50% of your dad.
Okay.
This mtDNA test that we did for you it's all your mothers. Okay. So that's your maternal line going back thousands of years.
Wow. Okay.
Right. What's also important about mtDNA, again, are those matches. So these are going to be those maternal matches. Again, your mom and your brother are going to get very excited about.
Okay.
Well, we were able to look at those matches, and most of your maternal matches have origins in Germany.
Interesting. Wow.
And I believe from the documentation and looking at the immigration records, looking at the records from Castle Garden, kind of looking at the place where Johann and Christina, your second great grandparents, were married. They were in an area in Russia, but it's now known as the Black Sea Germans.
Huh. Okay.
So remember when I talked about those moving boundaries?
Yes.
In Europe, right? You're part of that because there was that Russian versus German, and there's a little bit of both because they identified as Russian in their documents. Mm-hmm. The DNA today, looking at people in family tree DNA in their database, identifies them as German.
Okay. Okay. Oh, that is very yeah. Okay. It's funny because
through that
when we talk about the back and forth, it comes out through these results too.
Yeah, I think it's important, as you mentioned, as we get into the holidays, to really kind of talk about this and discuss it and understand those boundaries and how things change. And I think this is just a great moment and a start to understanding more about who you are.
Absolutely. And I appreciate all that you've done, Kenyatta, and for your research and for compiling all this information for me. Before we close, you mentioned the holidays. Talk a little bit about, for those who are tuning in right now and they're thinking to themselves, I want to get a DNA kit for my family or for myself. I guess what would be some information that you would share with people just in terms of making that right buy, that right purchase, and also kind of setting expectations that are realistic?
Yeah, great question. I think there's a couple things you need to figure out what your goal is. I think there's a lot of DNA tests out there. You test it with Family Tree DNA. They have their own lab. They're the only company, consumer DNA company that has their own lab. They're the only company that doesn't sell your data to third parties, right? So for other companies, as soon as you spit in the tube or swab your cheek, it goes to a third party. So I think as you think about that, privacy is a concern for you. Then read the terms and conditions and understand that when you're purchasing a DNA kit. Also, you've done 2 DNA tests. You did the autosomal, which is the most common one, right? Mother and father. But you also got a lot out of just doing your maternal side of the family. And if you want to do that, I suggest going with Family Tree DNA because they're the only ones to offer both maternal and paternal. And then if you want to do health, then also 23andMe does that.
Got it. A huge thank you to genealogist Kenyatta Berry and to you for tuning in to another edition of Need to Know, Rochester's News Magazine.